Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Ruggiero, Vice President of Communications for Quilts Incorporated, and I have the esteemed honor right now to introduce to you this year's top dog in our contest, the Festival Judge Show, the Handi Quilter Best of Show Award winner. That's a $12,500 prize, and this year it went to Deborah Hyde for her quilt Monkeys in My Hair, Evie, which you see behind me right here. So, Deborah, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I am so excited to win this award. What a huge honor. It's
We
really
were
special
chatting.
to me.
We were chatting a little bit before, and I said starts your reign as the quilting rock star of the year. So, so I'm sure a lot of people are interested. To get to this level, how did you first get interested in quilting or involved in quilting?
Well, I think I would first say that I've always been very interested in art and faces, drawing people, and that sort of thing. But I also come from a long line of seamstresses. My grandmother, my mother, both were quilters and clothes makers. And then my mother-in-law also was a really avid quilter. So as a young woman, I wasn't so interested in quilting, but I always really enjoyed watching the things that they were making and the quilts that they were producing. My mother-in-law especially was very creative and very, very interested in everything new that was happening in quilting. And so I felt like I got to kind of vicariously follow her path for a while. And actually, what got me interested in my style of quilting, this is a little maybe circuitous, but she started becoming very interested in a technique. I think it was called flower garden. I think it was something like that, quilting, where you take squares of fabric and kind of try to design a scene using those. And as I watched her do that, and she was creating some nice things, it really got me interested in the idea of could you use the same kind of a technique and start to do kind of more realistic portraits and that kind of thing. So I tried that, and that's how I really got interested in quilting. I've also done other kinds of quilts, more very traditional quilts, and I've really enjoyed that too. Just the whole process of quilting is an enjoyable experience for me.
So it sounds like with your family and your mother-in-law, you were basically surrounded by a lot of quilters. So for you to kind of go into, I don't want to say the family business, but it wasn't
Right.
that great of a leap for you.
Right, exactly. That's very true.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. Well, of course, this quilt behind me, again, the Handi Quilter Best of Show Award winner, based on your granddaughter. So tell me a little bit about how you got that idea and then how you took that idea in your head to the process of what we see behind me right now.
Okay. Actually, I've done many quilts that have a figure, in the background, and or not in the background, but as the main subject of my
Mhm.
work. And you can even see behind me here, I have another quilt hanging up that's similar to that. It has a figure in there. That's my neighbor who posed for that for me. But I've done quilts just of my son, my daughter-in-law, my her sister when she was a baby, and all of those were really experiments that I just continued to work on, finding that I would have to use really, really small squares of fabric to meet my own demands about getting detail in the face. Um, I would say that I have a few rules for myself when I do my quilts. I don't paint on the quilts. I don't dye my own fabrics. I really have to find fabric that's commercially available,
Mhm.
that has the kind of information in each little half square that fits with the portrait that I'm trying to do. And so that means I spend a lot of time planning. Uh, I start out with Pellin, which is a backing
All right.
that it has an iron-on quality, and in this case, it has a 1-inch grid. And I use that. I draw an image on that that's going to be. It's literally 4 times bigger when I'm working on it than when I end up sewing it all together, because that 1 inch that I'm working on, that 1-inch grid, with all the seam allowances and so on, comes out to just a half an inch square that's revealed. So it's just a quarter of the surface area. So that takes a lot of planning. It's a lot of kind of obsessive compulsive attention to detail that brings the portrait to its fruition. And I really want it to look a lot like the person that I'm trying to depict. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to do that. So these things take a very long time to do.
Well, it certainly sounds like if someone's related to you or lives near you, they might end up on a quilt. Are you
Yes,
working on
right.
one for your mail carrier next or anything like
Yeah,
that?
right. Exactly. I've done some just, kind of more imaginative quilts too, just of figures in from my imagination. But I really like working on things where I have a more personal relationship with the subject.
Well, speaking of that, I've got to ask, what did Evie think when she first saw this completed for the first time?
Well, she was a little bit too young to maybe appreciate it in its entirety, but I remember it was around Christmas time, and she was, I think, around 4 years old at the time, 3 or 4. And I knew I wanted to do something with her. And we spent time trying to get her to take a very serious picture. And then it took a long time for me to kind of draw that out, because after I take a picture, I draw my own portrait and think about that. This was the first time that I really tried to incorporate all these little fantasy creatures in as part of the picture. So normally I don't do that. Yes. That was the innovation of this quilt that I had never tried before. And I did that, I think, mainly because of the two little monkeys, one kind of on each side of her ear. That's I think, a pretty old piece of fabric that I inherited from my mother-in-law.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah, a lot of when my mother-in-law passed, she had a huge stash of fabric that I inherited. And it's been very nostalgic and fun for me to just use a lot of those fabrics in my quilts anyway. But this particular thing, I thought that would be really fun because it captures my granddaughter's personality if I could stick these little monkeys in her hair. So it was interesting to try to cut out those pieces because I didn't just applique them on. I mean, that would have been a way to do it. But instead, I cut out, I needed 4 examples of each image to cut squares and fit them together because I had to take into account the seam allowance. It's kind of complicated. Well, it took me a while to figure out anyway. But that way, the quilt is all of a piece. There is no applique animals. Those are all, sewn into the fabric, just like any other square of fabric. So once I started thinking about the monkeys, then I realized I had so many beautiful fabrics with dragonflies and frogs and bees and butterfly. I thought, let's throw them all in. I kind of really went berserk. But it was very fun for me because it was something I'd never tried to do before. And I had to kind of keep figuring out how I could incorporate these pieces in. So you can see from the quilt, I guess one thing I would just point out that if anybody asked me like what the hardest thing to do in the quilt would be, it would definitely be a person's eyes. Whenever I do quilts of people, if the eyes are not right, it doesn't work. It can look very odd
Mm-hmm.
if they don't work. So that has to be perfect. And then after that, there are parts of the quilt that are fairly easy, like just the general skin tone. There are parts or areas of the face that don't require a lot of attention. But then doing the hair, as I'm sure anybody could see if they looked at a close-up of that, all kinds of fabric that I use to try to create all these, strands of hair. As I said, none of that's painted on. I have to find a square of fabric that's matching whatever of the strands of hair that I'm working on. And, it's really quite a challenge.
Hmm.
So I would say the quilt itself took me over a year to do. Well, I'm sure it did. Working, almost every day and for more than a few hours every day. So it's the kind of a thing for someone who doesn't mind not having a big output of quilts, but doing something that's very exacting.
Hmm.
That wouldn't be for everybody. That's for
Oh,
sure.
no, absolutely not. So, now I'm sure through your creative journey in quilting, you've had ups and downs and learned things as you progress. I'm kind of curious if you could have one quilting superpower, something that would happen with all of your quilts, what would it be and why?
Wow, that's a hard question. I think I guess what I always, I don't know, this is not maybe very helpful, but what I always regret as I'm doing a quilt, when I'll get into tough spots in an area and think, why didn't I plan this out better? I always think I've planned it out perfectly. And it's, I know exactly what to do with each area every step of the way. And then I'll get to some place where I get really confused. And I think, why didn't I draw this with more detail, or, that kind of thing. So I would say that's the thing. It's just that what I do requires a lot of pre-planning. It's not just like, I can put up an easel and just start sticking squares of fabric on it. It really takes a lot of time. And
Yeah,
the
this looks really just thrown together at the last
more,
minute.
yeah,
I don't know how it turned out this one.
yeah. Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
they are really time consuming.
Oh, great. Well, Deborah, thank you for joining us again. Congratulations. Deborah Hyde, who's won the Handi Quilter Best of Show award winner this year. You can see this quilt and all the award winners November 2nd through 5th at the International Quilt Festival in Houston. And also, all of the winners are available online at quilts.com if you can't make it to the show. So, Deborah, thank you for taking the time to join us. And again, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Bob, and thank all the organizers of the show. I really love being represented. Thank you.
Great.